Hello viewers, today we're going to take a look at the telephones I have set up in my house as of November 2024. We're going to take a look at all these telephones and then I'm going to put them all away, because I always like to go down to a bare bones, if you will, setup before Christmas time so that I can give the surface space priority to Christmas decorations. So I'm going to put all these away and then get everything Christmas out. Hopefully sometime between now and Christmas, or sometime around Christmas, I'll be able to finish my telephone organization project. The reason why there have not been a lot of telephone setups is because it just takes me hours and hours to find anything. And a lot of times I can find a base and the handset, but I can't find a power cord or something like that, and it's just really frustrating. So I tried to embark on this project a month or two ago, and I got maybe halfway through because I think I compiled most of the telephone stuff into one area of the house, but it still has zero organization to it. So I still have to go through and figure out how to organize it better, or at all. But that's why I haven't been doing a lot of phone setups, because I just haven't been able to spend that much time dealing with the phone organization issue. But I will fix that soon. So anyways, here in the living room we have the Panasonic KX-TG1031S, and unfortunately I've had a lot of problems with this particular set. I think I lost 3 of the handsets so far with the display failure. Now the displays on the Panasonic phones from this era are unfortunately becoming known to have issues, and I just don't understand what the issue is, because we know with the Vtech phones and the AT&T phones, which are the same OEM, the displays in those often go bad during the 5.8, 2.4, 900 era, and it's almost always a deterioration of the connection between the ribbon cable and the PC board. And the letter H developed a way to repair that, and so that's great. But with the Panasonic phones, I don't know what the failure method is, and I don't know how to fix it. I kind of feel like it's some type of software issue, because I've had various anomalies surface with the screen. Sometimes they'll fill with arrows, sometimes it'll go away and then come back, sometimes it'll just be faint. I would think if it's a physical failure it should just go away and that's it. But then again, I don't see how it could be a software issue, because I would assume that the system runs on ROM, and so how is it changing? Don't know. If anybody knows or figures it out, let me know, because I have a bunch of Panasonic phones that I'd like to fix. And unfortunately this issue with the screens is probably only going to get worse. Any kind of electronics collecting hobbies it's becoming an uphill battle, because the stuff is getting old, the capacitors are getting tired, and a lot of the stuff just doesn't want to work right anymore. And even though it's more reliable, it's been more reliable for the majority of its life than anything you can buy today. At some point, you know, it stops becoming reliable, and unfortunately we're getting to that point with some of these models that weren't as well made. This particular phone has become very nostalgic to me over the years. I remember a relative had one of these, I forget when, but I think all the way back to the late 2000s they had got this set of phones, and it was a set of 3. And previously there was in the kitchen at that house, which is where the base went, there was a replica rotary phone with, you know, with the push buttons. That was in the kitchen, and then in one of the bedrooms there was some type of probably 90s I forget if it was a Lucent or AT&T, whatever the branding was, but it was one of those AT&T style phones. I think it even had an answering machine on it. And then in the bedroom, and this is going back to the early to mid 2000s, there was a cordless phone in the bedroom, which was a real old school, like, metal telescoping antenna, you know, like 80s or 90s product. And that was kept around until these were purchased at that household in the 2000s. I would say mid to late 2000s. That was so long ago. I really wasn't into cordless phones at that time. Back then I was more interested in corded phones, and then that kind of changed over the years. But so I don't remember that phone much. I just remember it existing, and even then it was like, wow, that's really old. So these phones were installed in that house in the mid to late 2000s. I remember seeing them when I would go over there. I usually only go there a couple times a year because it's pretty far away. We had gone up there to get the dog, because that's where the dog breeder was nearby. So we went up there to get the dog, and I forget what the occasion was, and I really can't remember why on earth this would have arisen, but for some reason I was there at the house by myself, and this is 2016, 2017 era. I was entering into the era of starting to buy a lot of phones. I started to get like avidly interested in cordless phones in, I would say, the real early 2010s. Maybe even late 2000s, really late 2000s, early 2010s. I started to get really interested in cordless phones, and I was starting to pay a lot of attention to what models were around. Because at the time, there was still a lot of good phones, even for sale. You could still buy Uniden products. And so that was in like 2016, 2017. I started working full-time in 2018. And so I had a decent amount of money to throw around then. And so that was kind of around, I mean, I worked when I was in college too, so I had some money. But I would say mid 2010s, mid to late 2010s is when I started to buy a lot of cordless phones, and that's when the channel's cordless phone series really started to take off. But the point I was getting to is that we were at the house in later mid 2010s, and I remember being there by myself. I had no idea why. Well, of course, what else would I do besides play with the phones? So I remember I took a picture of the model number, and I went back home, got the dog, and then I remember sometime in the weeks after that, I remember going on eRipoff, which at the time wasn't too bad yet. I remember I bought a lot of the earlier cordless phones that I got. You know, most of them actually came from there, and the prices were usually pretty reasonable. But anyway, so I went on to eRipoff and I bought a set of these, and I remember the day it came in. Just one of those odd blips in time that I have a vivid memory of. It came in, and I remember setting it up. I always liked the way the buttons worked on these. The buttons were like really sensitive, and they worked nicely. And I remember opening it up and pushing the buttons, testing out the buttons, making sure they all worked, and then I took it outside. That was always one of the first things I did, was to take the phone outside and see how long the range was, because living at the old location, the property was very large, and so having a phone that would cover a decent part of the property was important to me. And so oftentimes when I would get a new phone, the first thing I would do was test the range. And so I remember I want to say it was still June, because the leaves had had just come on. It was a rainy day. It had rained, and there was a break in the rain. And I just remember walking outside. I went back to where the old patio area was, and I rounded the back of the table and started clipping out. I said, wow, that range is really disappointing. But that was my first memory of using these phones using these phones myself. And they're just generally pretty good phones. The only lackluster thing about it is there's no backlit display. Not display. Buttons. Buttons is not backlit, which really is kind of outrageous because backlit buttons became standard, more than standard with the 5.8 era, and so I don't know why these didn't have it. These also thank you for your call after it hangs up the answering machine, which is so stupid. So that's over here in the living room. Looks nice here. And moving on. Over here we have, oh, this is just kind of a throw together. I meant to replace those 5831s with something else, but when I went to replace them, I always have a hard time putting those away because those are among the most nostalgic phones to me, because that's the set that we had growing up in the first house. We had those from, like, I want to say 2004 until 2009, and I remember those pretty well. So I would say that, the XCA-650, which will be featured in this setup, and the EXP370, those three phones are the most nostalgic phones, cordless phones to me. Although the 2080 is definitely up there too, because I remember my grandparents got those back in the late 2010s. And then wow, it's hard to believe the 1580 is now, that came out in I think 08. I mean, that's, what is that, that's 15 years old now. Wow. So even that one is pretty nostalgic too, because 15 years ago, there's definitely numbers from 15 years ago. Wow. It's crazy to think I've been doing this for so long. Anyway, so we have a General Electric phone, which is a terrible product, and then the two color display and regular display 5881s there. Over here at the, I'm just going to take this, I gotta push this chair in. Over here at the music player computer, we have a Vtech telephone. We'll get the model number off the base, but this is just that basic model with without speakerphone. This one has two handsets. I remember picking up this one of these back in the, I would say, mid 2010s. I was in college, and I started to go to tag sales because I was working. Oh jeez, I almost just broke this chair. I was working part-time when I was in college, and I had a Saturday shift. I worked on Saturday mornings, and I liked that shift because it was 8 to 12, but it was double time because it was the weekend. So I would always opt to work that if I could. And I would get off at 12 o'clock, and that particular area was very densely populated where my job was. And so I could go to a bunch of tag sales after work at, between 12, 1 o'clock, whatever. A lot of them close at 2 or 5 is pretty common. So I would stop at a lot of tag sales, and back then you could actually still see decent phones in service. I remember picking up plenty of 5.8 gigahertz phones and early Panasonic DECT6 models, and I got one of these. The original one was the CS-6114. I think this has a slightly different model. This is a newer version. The keytone is a little different. But I remember getting one of those, and I didn't have a lot of phones yet, so to find a phone, to find a new cordless phone at the time was a big deal. Plus, it was one that I had kind of wanted because I remember seeing one at one of the skate shops in the area called CT Bike that unfortunately closed very recently, which is a major shame. That was a great local business, independently owned. But at least it closed because the owner retired, as opposed to the whole place just going out of business or something trashy like that. But anyways, so I got that phone, and I think I told this story in the setup video, but the particular sale that I got this at it was one of those ones that was run by a company, one of those companies that would come in and just run an estate sale at your house. And I would later learn to kind of just avoid those because the prices were usually outrageous and the people that ran it were usually outrageous. And I remember this phone, the price was something kind of kooky. I think she wanted like $8 or $10 for it, and it was really dirty, and the battery was probably spoiled because I'm sure it was in use for several years. And I remember telling the lady, I'm like, you know, that seems kind of steep because the battery is probably worn out and it's really dirty. And she says to me, this is ridiculous. She says to me, well, the homeowner was a mechanic. He was a dirty man, or something like that. I just remember looking at her like, what are you saying? Stupid. I wish I had half the nerve I did now at that time, but I would have said something to her and gotten stuff for free, because that's crazy to say that about people that make the world go, make the world function. Is dirty. She's a nut. She was a nutcase. Anyways, that's I can't look at these phones without thinking of her, because that was just so outrageous to me that she said that. Next we have the Uniden. There's our tripod kick for the video. We have the Uniden 2080 cordless phone. So this is the model that my grandparents bought back in 2007, I want to say, or 2008. I remember going with them to Radio Shack and picking out these phones, and I remember using these phones at their house the night that we got them, setting them up, and I thought they were really cool because I had at the time a Uniden XCA-650, and the entering machine software, at least the voice anyways, remained the same on Uniden's phones pretty much forever. It was the same voice over decades. And I just thought it was really cool to kind of have a similar feel to the 650 inside what at the time was a very modern and sleek package like this. And I just really wanted to get one, but of course at the time these were expensive. It was totally not affordable. But I remember getting these well, and these were in service over there for quite some time, and then I think there was lightning damage to the base at one point, and then it was replaced with the 1580. And that 1580 was in service for a long time over there until it was replaced for no reason. Fortunately, I still have the 1580. But yeah, I've got a lot of memories of these phones. There was 3 colors. No, actually, it was 4 colors. There was a black one, a red one, and a blue one. I have the black and the red set up. I couldn't find a blue one at the time. I wanted to put all 4. I know I have several. I have the original ones, actually, because when my grandparents got the 1580, I had gotten, so I had the 1580. When we moved to the old location, we brought with us the Vtech 5.8 gigahertz phone, which only had 2 handsets, and the buttons were always going bad on those things. So it was kind of a joke because it was a pretty big house, and 2 phones was just totally not enough. And I had the XCA-650, and I had the EXP370, and neither of those were really high performance phones in terms of range, and so it didn't cover the yard deck, which is why I really wanted one of these, because these have pretty good range compared to that stuff anyways. And so my parents had kind of stopped using the landline phone when we moved. Like, it was a really quick shift from using the landline phone almost exclusively to using the cell phones almost exclusively. Like, that transition happened within a couple of months. I have no idea what the reasoning was. Maybe the cell phone plan changed from something that counted the minutes to something that didn't. I don't know what the reasoning was, but that happened. And so it wasn't really cared about that the phone system was inadequate, but I still liked to use the landline phone, so it bothered me. And I remember harassing the living daylights out of my grandparents to get me a set of 1580s, because, and actually, if I recall correctly, I think my grandmother's kind of to blame for that, because she opened that can of worms, because there was a deal at BJ's, and I wish I saved the package. I hate that the package got thrown out. That bothers me so much. Oh, I wish I had that package still. There was a box of 6 1580s that was on sale at BJ's, and my grandmother showed it to me. I don't know why she did that, but she showed me that box of 6, and I remember going to BJ's and checking them out in person. Maybe that's what it was. She brought me there, and because I remember looking at them in the store and thinking, wow, I actually like these even better than the 2080, because the buttons were, they had the acrylic buttons, whereas these, if you use this too much, it'll wear out. Those 1580 will never wear out, like the writing on it and so forth. And so I made up my mind that those were like the best phones on the planet at that time, and I remember harassing my grandmother endlessly to get me a set of those phones, and she eventually did. And so that's how I ended up with the 1580 at that house. We had 6 handsets, and it was great. It was a dream come true. And I don't know how long after that, but like a year or 2 after that, I discovered, because this is when I started to really get into the phones, I discovered that Uniden makes a waterproof phone. And so I had to have the waterproof phone. So here we go again, I'm harassing everybody for the waterproof phone. And I finally got one for my birthday. And so it was a dedicated base unit, because the 1580 was full. It can only take 6 handsets, so it was full. I got the dedicated base. So in theory, I could add 5 more handsets. So I had that, and then we fast forward a year or 2, and the lightning storm, whatever, I guess damages the 2080 at my grandparents' house. And so I said, well, let's get the 1580, because I've used it and it's great. I had it for a couple of years. I think this is around 2012, 2011. It was towards the end of them. And so there was the base plus the 4 handsets. No, it was 4 handsets in total of the 2080 system. So my grandparents bought a new set of, I believe it was of 5 1580s, and they kept one of them to make a 6th from the 2080 and put it in the garage, and it was actually this one. It kept the base and the silver handset and put that in the garage. I re-registered the silver handset to the 1580, and my grandfather used it in the garage, and so the base was just acting as a charger because I wanted the 3 colored handsets. So I took the 3 colored handsets, I used them with my waterproof base, and my grandfather kept this one in the garage, and that's how it was used for years. And shortly after that, my aunt and uncle got a 1580 set also upon my recommendation, which was great. I think that was a 3 handset system plus a waterproof that my uncle kept in the garage. And so for a couple years, all 3 of us had the 1580s, and it was awesome. You know, the phones, they were falling out of favor at the time. I was in high school at the time. They're falling out of favor, but they're still being used. You could still go almost anywhere and see one. I even had a couple of friends in high school that would still use the home phones. My uncle used them. My grandparents used them. I remember talking to my grandfather all the time on the home phone, you know, all through the 1580s, and the sound quality was so good. I really do think that those 1580s are some of the best cordless phones ever made. Oh, I almost forgot about this. So this thing is actually an artifact from the first house, I think. Yeah, it is. My mother had bought that, and I used to have it on my desk at the first house, or maybe my mother had it somewhere. It might have been somewhere else in the house. I remember having it on occasion, but that was floating around for a while. I don't really remember using it at the old location, but that's kind of one of those things that somehow traveled from the first house to the old location and then to here. I just found it a couple weeks ago in a chest of drawers. Here is a General Electric memory phone. This is the General Electric memory phone model 2-9266A. This is an, I think it's an AT&T product made in Malaysia. It's not saying, it's either AT&T or Thompson. I can't imagine it's something else. Oh, it's Thompson. Thompson Consumer Electronics. And interestingly enough, this is one of the good ones. From my experience, GE phones either are complete trash or they're pretty good. This one's pretty good. This one is another very nostalgic phone. This has been around actually longer than me, I think. This was originally given to my mother as a birthday present, which I didn't know that until a couple years ago. I was digitizing VHS tapes that my grandfather had filmed, and there's a video of the birthday party and my mother opening up this phone as a gift, and it was so interesting to watch that from 30-something years ago, because she opened it up and it was like a telephone, and everybody is just marveling over this telephone. And nowadays, like, nobody would even care. It was just so interesting to see how that has changed over the years, and how at one point other people were as excited about this stuff as I am. Moving over to here, we have my childhood phone setup in completion. This is a Uniden XCA-650 with an SBC branded call waiting, caller ID system, caller ID box. I got this equipment from my uncle, from my aunt and uncle, back in the 2000s, and this was used by my aunt and uncle from 95, 96, whenever this was whenever this was manufactured, up until 2004 probably, or 2005. It would have been whenever they had bought the Vtech 6763 to replace it. And the phone, I was told that it works, but it had battery problems and the battery life was short, which is, after 10 something years is fairly reasonable for the battery to go bad. And I remember it had sat for a while before I actually set it up and used it. I remember the day I set it up, and I just thought it was so cool to have a cordless phone now. I always had a telephone in my bedroom, but it was a corded phone. And so I set this up and I had a cordless phone. And this, back in the early to mid 2000s, no, it was definitely mid 2000s by then. This was old, but it was still, at that age, to have my own cordless phone. That was something back in the time. So I had this, and I used it and never had a problem with the battery once. And I think, and I picked up on this over the years, other people have noticed this too. Certain batteries, certain cordless phone batteries, when they would sit idle for an extended period of time, would like rejuvenate. I don't know how else to describe it. And this phone sat for might have been a couple years, maybe a couple months, I don't remember what the timeline was, but it sat for a decent period of time. Then the battery is still plugged in and everything. I got it out and charged up and used it one day. And battery charged up and everything was perfectly fine. So the battery remained good up until, actually I don't think the battery ever died. The battery was good. I remember using this in the late 2010s with the original battery still, and it would last a week plus off the cradle. But yeah, I use this phone constantly. I can't believe that this is in such good condition still, because this thing, I mean, it's a little bit, it's definitely got some wear on it, but generally speaking, it's in pretty good condition. And this thing went everywhere. I used to play out in the woods all the time. This thing would come outside, all over the yard, all over the house, the neighbor's house, up and down the street, and this thing was everywhere. And I guess I must have taken reasonable care of it, because it's still around and still in pretty decent shape. It had the time announcement on here.
Sunday, 5:13 p.m. U.M.
Which I thought that was really cool. I used to use that all the time. And then callerID box had the same one, this exact setup. Both of this piece of equipment. At one point, I had built like a. I can't believe it survived this too. I had built like a stand for it, and I mounted it vertically on the stand, and I had the callerID box. I wonder if there's pictures of that stand somewhere. Yeah, this thing has been around for a long time, and it's a pretty good phone too. It still works really well. Here in the kitchen, this is more of the dining room, we have the infamous Uniden DECT1580 set. This is the base. I think what I might do for the winter time, or for the next month or two at Christmas, is I'm going to put these documents out of the way. I'm going to put a 1588, which is the corded version of the 1580, on the wall here. I also thought about putting it on the wall over there,
because then that would really free up this area. I don't know, I gotta think about that. Maybe two different options, but over here we have the Vtech 6763, and this is an excellent telephone. The speakerphone, I really think that this is one of the best speakerphones I've ever used on a handset. I use these things all the time. This is probably my most used telephone, at least for the last couple of weeks. I have a lot of long speakerphone conversations using these. This particular set has 3 handsets. 2 of them still have a good screen, which is nothing short of a miracle. One of the screens has failed, the other 2 are somehow still good. I don't really want to put these away because I'm afraid the screens are going to break. Probably doesn't make any difference if it's on or off. You know, the glue is what's deteriorating, but I don't know, I just feel like I should leave it on. But similarly to the XCA-650, my uncle also gave me this set. Not this particular instance, but a set of these. And that was when he replaced it with the 1580. And that would have been early 2010s, 2011, 2012, definitely right towards the end. So these were in service for a decent amount of time at his house, and he had replaced the batteries a couple times and only ended up replacing the system itself as a whole because the screens were starting to fail, which is a shame. If those screens didn't fail, it probably would still be in service to this day. But he gave me the system when he replaced it, and I liked it because it reminded me of the Vtech 5881 that we used to have, and I didn't have one at the time yet, so I had this one, and it reminded me of the 5881, so I really enjoyed it. And then it turned out to be a really good phone. So this is one of the phones I got earlier on in my cordless phone collecting days, and I have used this phone almost all the time through the varying setups over the years. It's definitely one of my heavily used phones, and it's a really good phone too. I have a lot of memories of that phone back in the 2010s. So over here in the kitchen, we have the base of the Vtech 5881. Now, I have it over here because in the first house where we had these phones, the kitchen, the sink and everything was in a different spot, but there was a counter like this up against the refrigerator. This wall was kind of similar, and this is where the phones sat. They were in the kitchen, on a counter up against the refrigerator, just like this. It was like that for years when I was growing up, and so that's why I have this here like this, to kind of replicate that original setup. Here on the wall we have a Cortelco 2500. No, this is a 2554, which is just a classic iconic install. I do want to put cordless phones here at some point. I now have the provisions because I brought a power bar up and put it in a closet, but I might have to move the power bar up and mount it on the wall because I think that the distance from the floor up to the phone might be too long, and I'm going to have to drill some kind of hole in the wall. I guess maybe like right at the bottom where I can pass an AC adapter cord through to set up the cordless phone. Here in the media room we have a Uniden DCX200. This is the black one. This was always in the lower level of my grandparents' house. And then over here we have a dark forest green Trimline telephone. This one is Lucent branded. It's a Lucent 210. And somehow the original, or I don't know if it's the original or not, but a 25-foot cord in the exact same color has survived in immaculate condition all these years. I just got this table set up recently. This is another place that we can put a telephone. I'm trying to get more area set up where I can put telephones and they'll look good, like in a natural habitat, if you will. And then over here I have this set of General Electric cordless telephones. Oh man, these are a terrible product. This is the General Electric. It's by Thompson 28223EE3-A. Deplorable cordless phone. A friend of mine had a similar telephone to this. It was black. It was also DCT6. And so I have some nostalgia to these early DECT 6 era G phones. But these were terrible phones. The screens often failed on these for the same reason that the AT&T and Vtech ones would fail, the ribbon cable. So in theory it could be repaired most of the time. These don't talk good. The range is terrible. The battery life is terrible. Maybe 24 hours off the cradle is all you get. Just overall terrible telephones. For whatever reason, these don't have the letter O in the alphabet. If you type the letter O, you get an O with those little dots above it, which is pretty stupid, so you can never type anything with an O. And then when you rename it, it doesn't replace handset 1, it just adds to it. The signal meter is full or nothing, it's not an actual measurement. This is confusing because the light comes on only for talk but not for speakerphone. I would have thought that the speaker illuminates for speakerphone. Just not good phones. I really don't talk on these much because they don't work good. In the bedroom we have a Panasonic 1031S handset. Over here at the bedroom desk we have a lot of laundry and a Vtech 5.8 gigahertz. I really like this setup. This looks really nice over here. By the bed there is a Uniden DCX150. And a Uniden 7980, which is another excellent telephone. Another very heavily used phone. I've used this one for years now. Set up almost all the time. This was the first phone I ever had in this house. I know it's been hooked up since I moved in, and it was hooked up pretty regularly at the old location too. This is a nice, iconic late 90s, early 2000s phone. This to me is when we saw one of the best intersections of a smaller size handset but still really good performance, particularly the digital spread spectrum models of this form factor. Those have the best range out of any phone. Much longer range than the modern DECT 6 stuff. And this handset to me, although it's a large handset, I find it extremely comfortable to talk on. I mean, I have big hands, but it fits in the hand nicely. It's got the nice rounded earpiece. The back has good ergonomics in the hand. It feels real nice in the hand. I think this is just an excellent telephone. And then we have the AT&T 100 telephone, which is actually another phone that I had very early on. This was given to me by my aunt. I found this, a different one than the one that had the XCA-650. I remember finding this in a closet in her house one day. I don't know why the heck I was rummaging through the closet, but I guess I was young enough where that was still an acceptable thing to do. I don't know. But I found this in a closet, and I asked her if she used it anymore, and she said I could have it. And so this was in the early, no, this would have been mid to late 2010s. Same era as when I started using the XCA-650. I remember using these two simultaneously. I had this one next to the bed on the bedside table, and then I had the XCA-650 either on the desk or on the dresser, I think, with the callerID box. So this has a lot of nostalgia to it as well. And then in the bedroom also, and lastly, we have the Uniden DCX200 in red. In the computer room, we have the other Vtech DECT 6 handset connected to the base. And as promised, the model number is, oh, it is the same, it's CS-6114-2. Pretty good phone. I like those phones. Nice, simple, basic product. Doesn't do much, but whatever it does well. I like products like that. They're far and few between nowadays. Over here, this is another nice setup. I like this setup a lot. Looks really nice. We have a Panasonic KX-TG7731 cordless telephone. At the computer desk, we have a Panasonic 1031S handset. And then on the other side of the computer, we have a Uniden D1483. And I have this one here too. I kept meaning to hook it up, but never got to it. And here's another one of those GE handsets. There's 3 in total. This is the third. They're all terrible. And that waterproof phone is connected to the 1483. I just didn't have anywhere to put it, so it's just sitting there on the windowsill. These I have a lot of nostalgia to as well. I remember back in, was it 2014 or 2015? We had gone to a vacation house, and it had one of these in there. This is pretty much the newer version of the DWX207. And this is a pretty cool phone. It's got really nice buttons. They have really nice feedback to them. It's got a signal meter, which is kind of neat. And like many of the other Uniden DECT6 phones, it was just overall a really good product. And I remember talking on it a bunch of times at that vacation house. I really enjoyed the trips we took to that house. It was a nice house. I guess it got sold since then, and the new owner no longer rents it. But it would be nice to go back there someday if possible, but I doubt it. There's one more phone upstairs, and that phone is in the bathroom. The DWX207 in the lime green color. I don't think I've changed this phone since I moved in. Not a lot of phones you can change it to because I really want to have water resistance in the bathroom. Although I could put a 5.8 waterproof in here. I was actually thinking that this Christmas time I want to try to do a setup with one of the 5.8 True series. I've never been able to use those at the old location because the stupid Wi-Fi always hosed the signal. I don't know if those are particularly sensitive to other 5.8 gigahertz phones as well or not, but that'll be an interesting test. I might be able to use those here. I'm hoping so. At least during Christmas time when I don't have a lot of other phones out, I don't see any reason why it shouldn't work. Downstairs in the studio, at the studio desk, which never seems to remain clean for any period of time, we have the third Vtech 5.8 gigahertz handset, and we have the partner ACS display phone, and then there's a ringer over there and a 2554 over there. The ringer and the 2554 probably will never change. There's just no reason to. Those are more there just out of practicality. Over here we have a Trimline that I just threw up just to have another phone. Never properly hung the wire or anything. It's got a nice ring to it. That's where the PBX is. By the cleaning area, there is another Uniden DCX150. I'd like to get a waterproof phone over here instead, but that would limit what I use here, so I just put it on the other side and hope for it stays dry, which it usually does. I don't splash around in the sink here because I don't want anything else to get wet either. In the garage, I have another 2554 hanging on the wall and a wheel lock extremely loud ringer. I'd like to add a callerID box to this configuration over here, but otherwise this setup is unlikely to ever change because it just is nice to have a good reliable phone in case there's ever an emergency out in the yard or whatever. Long cord, and then over here by the computer, this is the same telephone but it's a new setup. I have the Uniden DWX227 up here, which works really good because you can see it easily from anywhere in the room. You know, the phone used to get buried in junk on the table. You know, the table shouldn't be full of junk, but we all know the table at some point is going to get full of junk again and the phone gets buried, so at least up here the phone is easily accessible. And this is not hooked up either, but I just bought that and I just had it on the table here and I thought it looked really good there, so I left it. It's not going to be featured in the ringing video because it's not going to ring, but someday I want to set that up and use it there. So that's it. Those are all the phones I have set up in the house right now. I've been getting a lot of comments lately about people enjoying the stories of memories of using equipment in the past, so I tried to incorporate as much of the memories I have of using different phones over the years into this video.